were mentioning or describing the situation in Greece, you said that because now there's a center-left party in the government, that people don't see a political alternative. And then you asked the question, is it possible in Greece and in other European countries that some new radical left is formed from this center-left party? And then you went on to the Latin American examples, and I didn't catch the answer on your question. So my question would be twofold. So how do you see the perspective of the forming or emergence of new parties of a new radical left, and how do you see their struggle for socialism through the mechanisms of representative democracy, i.e. elections?
Well, I will be going to, I've just received an invitation to go to Athens to speak at a big public rally by by a group which is just organizing a new alliance of the left. So I will be in a better position to reply to it after I visited the country. But whenever I go to Greece, what always depresses me is the number of left-wing groups who are fighting each other. It's the rest of Europe has grown out of it. But in Greece you have the interior Communist Party, the exterior Communist Party, a split off from the old Communist Party, and they can't even demonstrate together. Sometimes on May Day you had 3 different demonstrations. Once when you had one, they fought each other. So it's as if the whole experience of what happened in Eastern Europe has passed them. It's not had any impact on them. And that worries me. So if they are able to surmount that and see that they really need now to create something new, they can't use that same style of political organization. They have to learn to be open, to talk to people, to not say that the Central Committee is right permanently. If they haven't learned that, then I think something new will emerge out of this movement. How large it will be, I don't know. But it has got to emerge because there's no alternative now. On the right, it's a joke. And the center-left is actually putting these things through. And what I'm also interested in is whether any regional and local members of PASOK begin to see that they are committing total suicide if they carry on like this. So we will see. I'm not totally pessimistic, let me put it like that. As to whether a new group that is founded, if it is founded, will go through the structures of parliamentary democracy as in South America, I don't know, to be honest, because what tactics they will develop will depend very much on the situation that exists. And you have to understand that in most of South America, most of these countries, with the exception of Venezuela, but most of the other countries were ruled by ruthless military dictatorships for a long, long time. And the repression was vicious, really vicious. And so for them, democracy was an extremely important thing when they finally got it. And they refused to let it become a tame democracy like exists in Europe today. They rejuvenated democracy and democratic institutions. Chavez in Venezuela put in the constitution, which was passed by a referendum, the right of a certain percentage of people to demand a new election whenever they wanted. And they tried. His opposition, which had opposed the new constitution, then tried to get the signatures, but they failed. But so all these things were happening there. Now Greece too has had an experience of military dictatorship, as you know, and it was an extremely, they had a civil war during the Second World War and after the Second World War. And the left in Greece was very brutally crushed, put in concentration camps, killed. Then they had a limited democracy for a certain period. Then another military dictatorship came into power. Again, repression began. So what form they work out now in order to move forward is difficult to foresee, but it will be determined by the conditions created in that country by what is going on now.
Dobro večer. Zanima me, znači, pitanje na koje mislim da ljevica najviše treba odgovoriti, a to je...
Where are you? Where are you?
Ovdje sam.
Okay.
Ali ću sjesti. Znači, mislim da je najvažnije pitanje odgovoriti na, odnosno objasniti fenomen o kojem ste malo čas nešto spomenuli, znači Kina i Indija. U zadnjih 30 godina se, znači, postotak bijede tamo smanjio, dakle, najviše u povijesti. U Kini konkretno je sa 80% bijednih ljudi to spalo na ispod 20%. I to se sve desilo u kontekstu neke liberalizacije i zapravo uvođenja kapitalizma. Znači, slična stvar je u Indiji. Dakle, to je u povijesti najveće smanjivanje bijede i najbrže. Zanima me kako iz ljevičarske perspektive odgovoriti na to, jer ako se ne može odgovoriti na to, mislim da se nema zašto biti ljevičar.
Well, you know, I'll give there are many reasons to be a leftist in the country in where you live, by the way, because that hasn't happened here, and it hasn't happened in Bosnia, and it hasn't happened in Serbia, and it, you know, in Montenegro we have a family ruling that country, so there are big problems here. But the thing about India is it's really, I would advise you to be very careful before accepting these statistics just like that. Because I can give you other statistics which challenge this so-called drop in poverty, that you have had the largest numbers of farmer suicides in the history of India. Farmers who can no longer afford to live on the mechanisms being set up by this so-called liberalization. Thousands and thousands of Indian farmers have committed suicide. A huge figure. You have in large parts of India a virtual insurrection taking place, which sometimes they crush but can't totally crush, of the poor fighting with former Maoists for a transformation of their country. In big cities, in Calcutta, Kolkata, Mumbai, Delhi, there has been a big growth and increase in the size of a middle class. That is absolutely true. But this is a country of 1 billion people. And the number of people who still live in poverty-stricken conditions is horrendous. It has not trickled down below. If you say, let's say a person is earning €2 a month, and it goes up to €4 a month. And sometimes the salaries are as bad as that. Statistically, it can be registered as a big decline in poverty, but in real life it doesn't matter that much, because the increase in disparities of wealth between the poor and the rich go larger and larger and larger. That is what is happening in India on a very big scale. And these insurrections are not written about much in the global media, because it doesn't serve their purposes. But I will just tell you one story, that when this latest Congress government came to power in India a few years ago, they had a decent motivation. They said, we must try and end these armed uprisings, let's go and talk to these people and see what they want. So in the province of Andhra Pradesh, they sent top Indian civil servants to negotiate with the leaders of the insurrection what they wanted. And people who had been in the underground now for decades said, okay, let's talk to them. Let's see if we can agree on something. So they marched from their villages to Hyderabad, the capital of Andhra Pradesh. And it was a march of not just the leaders who many people had not seen for decades, but hundreds of thousands of peasants came behind them, because they said, we don't trust what you might do to our leaders, and they encamped around the building where the discussions were taking place. And they said, these civil servants, to the Indian peasant leaders, what do you want? Tell us, so we can help you. And one of these civil servants describes, this was not made public, by the way, but I happened to be in India soon afterwards, so I found out through talking to people. they said we were really embarrassed. They said, you know what we want? And they had copies of the Indian Constitution and the manifesto of the Indian Congress Party for the last 5 elections. And they had underlined bits. They said, here you are, that's all we want. Fulfill our constitution and fulfill the manifestos of your own party. You do that and we will stop fighting. The conversation ended. Civil servants went back to Delhi and these leaders went back to their villages where they have a lot of strength. So please don't be deceived by statistics. In China, it is absolutely true, and by the way, the Chinese economy has grown at a much, much higher pace. Interestingly enough, because China had a far better educated level of technician and scientist in that country as a result of what happened in the revolution than India did. But that's another story which we won't go into now. But even in China, the disparity between rich and poor in China today is larger than it is in the United States. And in this situation, to talk about people being pulled out of poverty, quite honestly, is a joke. You talk to many Chinese people. The magazine with which I am associated, New Left Review, publishes more on China than any other magazine in the world, I promise you that. So we have links with China, we discuss on every level with Chinese intellectuals from different political views. We have a round table where they argue each other, publish it. So we know that country well. And there's a big documentary made about the deindustrialization in parts of China, the Rust Belt, after the turn to capitalism. And the picture is quite horrific. And many, many Chinese people you talk to say it was better in the old days because at least we were sure no one would kick us out of our house or force us to leave our house because they could knock down whole parts and build new skyscrapers. Now they can do that. So the picture is, from the point of view of China's economic status in the world, is very big. But that's why I said what will happen in China we don't know, because at some stage the Communist Party will have to decide whether to go on or stop, or whether they have now made enough, industrialize, modernize the country, and stop working in a way which is increasing disparities, social disparities. People have to pay for education, the health system is not in a good way. So these are problems which exist, which we have to bear in mind, because these are the problems which can produce explosions, which can lead to new revolutions, and the Chinese are very aware of this. I mean, they are, at the moment they've decided to build 10 medium-sized cities, which are ultra-modern cities, but who will live there? Who will be able to afford to live there? That's the question that has to be asked.
So, the very last question to our comrade who came directly from Cyprus to be here, and for all of you who didn't have a chance to ask, tomorrow at 12 o'clock, Tariq Ali will be at Profil.
Thank you very much for coming here. My question is whether or not you think that you were a little bit unfair to Zorba, and whether or not Zorba can be considered a model for the new proletariat. If you remember the investment that his boss made to build from the mountain to bring down the trees collapsed. His boss was crying for his money. Zorba picked him up from the hand and told him, "You motherfucker, you will dance on top of your ruins," you know? And whether or not we can consider that as a model for, you know, the ones in power.
Look, I didn't mean to be taken so literally when I referred to Zorba. But all I meant was that when people know about Zorba, what they really know is not the novel, which is a wonderful novel by Kazantzakis. And you're right, he's a fighter. But that's not what most people know when you mention Zorba. Most of them know the Theodorakis song and the dance. And the point I was making was that they have to learn more about what the history and traditions of that country are. But yeah, the fighting spirit of Zorba the Greek is something we can all learn from. Thank you very much.